Okay, we're going to start to record now. All right, so how did we go from avodah? I'm sorry, yes. How did we make avodah look different? How did we go to a system of prayer when throughout the entirety of the Bible, except for 2 instances, what was our primary form of worship? Does anyone know?
You mean when it was sacrificed? You mean?
Sacrifice. That's the right answer. Our primary mode of worship is sacrifice. Now let's talk about sacrifice. I'm going to give you 2 words, korban and olah. Korban, sacrifice, olah, the burning of that sacrifice going up to the heavens, which looks to me to be a great way to communicate with deity. Namely that God, by our burning or making it an olah, it makes perfect sense, right? You see the smoke billow up, there's a smell attached to it, and you think to yourself, done, I'm in. I just communicated, good. The word korban, though, really doesn't mean sacrifice. It comes from the root to draw near, to come close to, okay? So it actually, if you think about it in the English, the word sacrifice isn't really the right translation, right? Sure, the way of drawing near in biblical times was to slaughter an animal, not always an animal, sometimes it was a grain offering, as a form of drawing near. But drawing near really opens up a lot of possibilities for us. Any questions about what I told you so far?
So then wasn't sacrifice more of a work than the praying we do today?
Wasn't sacrifice more of what?
A work than praying we do today. You had to light the fire, you had to slaughter the animal or whatever, or to put it on the altar.
Well, the fire's already lit and being tended to, right? So that's not a thing especially on Shabbat, you can't do that, right? But you're right, there has to be slaughtering of the animal. But Reuben, it's not malacha, it's avodah, which is the distinguishing factor between those 2 things, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is the kind of work that one can do. Whereas on Shabbat, whereas malacha, those levels of work which are physical in nature, but different, plowing one's field, dyeing garments, sowing seed, all those things are in a different category. Bindi, did you have something you wanted to add?
Oh, yeah. How did sacrifice come to be the important way of expressing what we know as prayer now? I mean, I've heard people say sacrifice was so that the priests would have something to eat. I don't know if that's true or not, but how did it become? How did sacrifice become so important? Am I making sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And part of what you said is straight on true, right? We know that the Kohanes and Levites don't have land. They're given the work of the sanctuary as their duty. The rest of our ancestors are farmers, right? They have food sources that, but the Kohanes, the Levites have no food source except for what people bring to slaughter for sacrifice. It's kind of like a very big barbecue. Now, I think what makes sense about this again is that the burning, the barbecue aspect of this animal, right, allows for this sweet, delicious smell and smoke going up. If you have the assumption that God lives on a higher realm, is above, then the fact that this smoke is able to penetrate that layer becomes very attractive as a way of communication.
Oh,
And it smells sweet. It smells delicious. So even more better. Okay? I hope that answered the question to some extent. Let's move on to the next slide, please. Okay. So in our Bible, we have a challenge here. We have a sacrificial, and the rabbi said to me, "I loved your presentation, but I hate sacrificial cult as a name." That's what we were, right? We were a sacrificial cult. And how do we make the transition? Why do we need to make the transition? Is coming up in the next slide. But here are what we can find biblically for maybe a proof text. Would someone please give a read to this prayer in the Bible slide?
Reuben Hammer discusses two examples of biblical prayer: the cry for help from Egypt and the song at the Red Sea.
Good, let's stop right there. These are two Exodus texts, right? One is interesting because it is curious. And why I say it's curious is because, allegedly, and I say allegedly with all respect, I am not a traditionalist, and I look at Torah as beautiful metaphor, sacred and spiritual and touched by God, but not exact, not word for word the way it happened. And so that's my bias, and I want to apologize for that right now. But we look at this first text where the people of Israel are crying out to God about their slavery in Egypt. And what's curious about it is that for hundreds of years, allegedly, the children of Israel were slaves in Egypt. So why is it that God doesn't hear them right away is a curiosity. But that's one really good instance of the sort of communication that our voices matter to God. The second is the song at the Red Sea. Now, what's interesting about this is a piece of this is snuck into our liturgy, right? And continues to this day. Does anyone know what part of our liturgy is from the song of the Red Sea? Okay, it's the Mihamocha. The Mihamocha. Who is like you, God, above all the gods who are worshipped? Who is like you doing wonders? So it's a song of praise. Okay, Reuben, do you want to continue reading?
Yes. No one can deny the importance of sacrifice in biblical and rabbinical Judaism. Nevertheless, the words of the sages in the Midrash are clear. When God performs miracles and wonders for us, the proper and necessary response is song and praise.
Nice.
Pagan worship is more than an attempt to influence the gods. It was a method of controlling them. Worship was accompanied by gifts which pleased the gods because they needed those gifts. Sacrifices were not symbolic offerings, but actually nourishment to be consumed. In contrast, the God of Israel was expounded by Moses, is not subject to physical need and not controllable by magic.
All of that makes sense to everybody? Okay, let's move on to the next slide. Okay, folks, now we got a problem. Here's our problem. If you are on board with me that sacrifice was the mode of talking to God, let me tell you something important. Sacrifice has only one destination, only one place on planet Earth where it can happen. And that's the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, in the physical temple. Now, what do we know about that physical temple? Anybody?
Oh, it was destroyed. It's
It
now
was destroyed.
it's now where the Muslims have their temple.
That's right. That's right. It has they have a very important mosque there, where they believe that Muhammad ascends to the heavens on a rock, and that rock is the rock where Abraham tried to slaughter Isaac. So that rock is got to be something else. Now, interestingly, as a Jew, I can't go in to see it, but that's what that mosque is built on. Okay, so we know that it could only be performed in this one spot, and we know that spot has been destroyed not once but twice. Once by the Babylonians in 586, and once by the Romans in 70. So our form of communication with God, what do? We got nothing worse. An example of the Babylonian exile, right? Our best and finest are in Babylonia. So how do we change the model here? Let's move on to the next slide. Okay, let's talk about the Mama Don't.
Excuse me, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Where is Babylonia?
So it's a rock.
Babylonia is a rock? It's
The
not.
modern day, it's a rock, right?
Iraq.
Oh, it's Iraq. IRAQ.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Not a rock.
Just
No,
said
I'm sorry.
Iraq.
Yeah, Iran, and it extends into Iran, modern day Iran as well.
Thank you very much.
That was good. That was good.
Buddy.
Yeah,
Little biblical humor for you.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me.
Forget I'm even here.
Bindi, that was good.
yes.
It was-
Yeah, I liked it, Ben. I liked it. Okay, so let's talk about the Ma'amadot. First of all, let me tell you what it is, okay? And then I'm going to actually read you the piece of the Babylonian Talmud, this 4:2 that it comes from Tractate Ta'anit. So this is fascinating. So now we know that the sacrifices, that we as Israelites have to perform these sacrifices, okay? But let's be truthful with one another. Not everybody's going to get their tushy to Jerusalem to do them. They can't. They're farmers, right? We talked about that. So you've got responsibilities at your little plot of land. And you know that these sacrifices are happening in Jerusalem, and you can't be there. What do? Well, here's what we know happened. There was the formation of these groups, and they were groups made of Israelites, priests, Levites, who were outside of Jerusalem, scattered. And at the time of the sacrifice, they are turning towards Jerusalem and offering up words, okay? So they can't be present at the site, but they're doing, for lack of a better word, prayer. And in this amazing gift, we are able to translate our sacrificial worship into worship of words, which is quite extraordinary. Let me read you what the Talmud actually says about this. What are the Ma'amadot? Since it is said, command the children of Israel and say to them, my offering, my food, in Numbers 28:2. Now, how can a man's offering be offered and he is not present? Therefore, the former prophets instituted 24 mishmarot, guards. For each mishmar, there was a ma'amad at the temple in Jerusalem, consisting of priests, Levites, and Israelites. When the time came for the mishmar to go up to Jerusalem, the priests and Levites went up to Jerusalem, and the Israelites of this mishmar assembled in their cities and read the story of creation. Numbers 28:2 states, command the children of Israel, saying, Of my near offering, my food, as my fire offering, my soothing savor, you are to be in charge, bringing it near to me at its appointed time. This verse is said in reference to the Tamid offering. The verse seems to imply that each Israelite is to offer the Tamid, and yet it is obviously impossible for all of Israel to be personally responsible for one offering. The Ma'amadot are a means through which all of Israel is able to participate in the Tamid, the one offering that's offered twice a day. Does that make sense to everybody?
No.
Mhm.
Okay, let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so traditionally, since the Second Temple prayer period, sorry, Lord, three prayer services are recited daily. These correspond to the 3 types of sacrifice on the Temple Mount. Let's read what they are. Do I have a volunteer?
The morning prayer, afternoon prayer, and additional prayer.
Yes, can you read for me the Hebrew?
Okay. Morning prayer, shakarit or shaharit, or shacharit from the Hebrew, shachar or shahar. Shachar, morning light.
Or dawn, right, exactly. Number 2?
Afternoon prayer, mincha or minha. Mincha, afternoon prayers, named for the flower offered that accompanies sacrifices at the temple in Jerusalem. Additional prayer, arvit. Arvit of the evening, or ma'ariv, bringing on night, from nightfall.
Can I ask a question? Anyone in the group ever see somebody on a Shabbat dinner take salt, put it on their challah plate, and dip their bread in the salt?
Well, I know when my husband was alive, he made challah trays with little wells of salt. Usually they were custom, usually from Orthodox people who wanted them. I don't think any Reform person ever asked for it, but the Orthodox or the conservative may have. And we had never even heard of that. So tell me about it. I don't know really what that's about.
Sure. So that's hearkening back to the sacrifice, where salt, a precious commodity, was important for the meat offering. So that's where that comes from. It's just a little hearkening back to the sacrifice, which in traditional communities is something that people, some, not all, still hope to go back to. They want that real estate on the Temple Mount, right? They want it back. They want to rebuild the temple. Now, you and I both know that would be World War VII, right? Probably World War VII and VIII together. It would be something else, right? All right, let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so let me say that prayer always follows a formula. Every Jewish service follows the formula in front of you. There are additions and there are subtractions, okay? But the formula from with the Shema, Amidah, the middle part, all the way up to the concluding is always followed, always. Now, the reason I took out the first 2 parts, Birchot HaShachar, or those morning blessings, and the Pesukei de Zimra, the verses of song, those are Saturday morning, and we're going to be discussing Friday night, okay? Now, this is the rubrics, and what's important about this slide is that hopefully you'll see the trajectory of things, okay? Let's dissect a little bit deeper. Shema and its blessings have 2 functions. Function number 1 is to say, let's get ready to communally worship. We're done with our warm-up, which would be in a Saturday morning, Birchot HaShachar and Pesukei de Zimra. That's our warm-up. We're done. We're going to begin now. Collective prayer. Prayer of the community. And we're going to announce creed, our belief statement. If you're going to talk, just come to mute yourself, okay? Whoever that is. Thank you. Next on our hit parade, and number 4, as you're going up the list, is Amidah. These are petitions, but petitions because they're not allowed on Shabbat in terms of our private begging, become about the community, wishes for the community, right? What I love about the Amidah is it starts with a calling card, which we're going to talk a little bit about. But if you notice, if you know anything about, let's say, the Avot in Imahot, which we're going to look at in a minute, they start out, Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu ve'Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu. Blessed are you, God, the God of our ancestors. And then we go on to list Abraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Leah, Rachel. God, in case you don't know who Shelly Friedman is, let me tell you a little bit about our ancestors, who I feel you're very well acquainted with. I'm the daughter of these people. So it's our calling card. At the end of those petitions, there's a silent meditation piece, which allows us not just communication privately with God, but ability to be reflective. Everything we do points to the pinnacle, which is Torah. So if the silent prayer is our words to God, the Torah is God's words back to us. And the last piece, the concluding, the Aleinu and Kaddish. I know that this is a vague sweep, but I just wanted to give you some context about what we're going to look at more specifically. Does anyone have any questions?
Well, actually, I have one. I've noticed since we've been in with this virus that I've looked in on other congregations and noticed that sometimes they've skipped the Baruch Hu. Do you think there's a reason they might do that?
Yeah, there's a very good reason. Baruch Hu is one of the prayers that one must do in a minyan. And we are ostensibly praying alone right now, right? Even though I can see you, we can't really pray collectively. And especially on something like Zoom, where if I put your voice on with me, we're not going to be able to sing at the same time because there's a delay. So I would imagine, Ruben, although I don't know for sure because I don't know which congregations you're talking about, it has something to do with the fact that communal prayer, that there's certain prayers you cannot do if you're not in a minyan quorum of at least 10 people. All right, let's swap into our next slide. Okay, so I wanted to talk about Emmanuel's Friday night service. And the reason I didn't go with the Saturday night morning service is really more people in the Reform movement tend to be at a Friday night service than a Saturday morning service. And I thought if we looked at it, we would see more similarities because maybe we'd been to a few of these. All right, let's talk a little bit about lighting candles. Lighting candles is not traditionally what someone does at their synagogue, but is something that we as Jews would do at home. As a matter of fact, the Kabbalah experience in a more traditional setting is a very short experience, right? And generally, the men go to it. They'll go to the synagogue for a very short amount of time, while the women bring in Shabbat. Now, in the unpacking of this bringing in Shabbat, let's talk about a few things, okay? And truthfully, I'm not sure we're going to get through all of these prayers today. We might have to do them next week. But I want to be sure that you get a sense of why we do what we do here. In Torah, it's very clear that lighting fire on Shabbat is prohibited. So if you're going to light candles on Shabbat, you have to imagine, well, how do I get this done without getting in the way of the prohibition, right? I don't want to be stoned, right? Which is what the price one pays for this. Which is why people bring in Shabbat earlier with the candles. And more importantly, Judaism makes the blessing, not the lighting of the candles, what brings in Shabbat. Let me explain. If you were to say the blessing before the candles are lit and then you light your candles, you've just broken the prohibition. So a construct that's not usually seen in Judaism. In Judaism, when we do a blessing, we then do the action. And it's imperative that we do the action because you don't want to do a false blessing. So what did Jews do here? Kind of fascinating. It's one of two that I can think of off the top of my head, two brachot that one does before the action. The other has to do with mikvah. So we light the candles, we cover our eyes. Maybe you've seen people do this, 1, 2, and 3. Cover our eyes, say the bracha, look at the candles, and voila, it's a miracle. Those candles are lit. Anybody have any questions about that? Or questions around candle lighting that they've seen and not been sure why we do what we do? You're all good. Awesome sauce. Let's move on to the Kiddush. You've probably heard a lot of words that have this root. Kiddush, Kedusha, Kedushat Hashem, Kedushat Hayam, Kodesh. This is from Kuf Dalet Shin. Hebrew is based on roots. This root means holy. So, Kaddish is another example, okay? So, this blessing over the wine or juice or any fruit of the vine, oh, go back here, thank you. Any fruit of the vine is, sorry, I just lost my train of thought because I was looking at I just got the slide, the other side of my head. Has two purposes. Actually, it's a bunch of purposes. I lied. I'll give you the top 3. One is it allows us to sanctify or make special the day. Judaism is very conscious about demarcation in time, and Shabbat is a very important demarcation of time. The Kiddush allows us to create immediate holiness. That's number 1. Number 2, it has a joy aspect to it, right? The fruit of the vine, right, is, the taste of this, being that there's a specialness to it, makes us feel joyful. And number 3, this Kiddush does something super important to our Jewish collective. It reminds us of Zecher L'Tziat Mitzrayim, remembering the Exodus from Egypt. Any questions about this piece? Now, if you are worshiping at home, right, this is part of your Shabbat dinner. And one of the videos I plan on doing, or maybe we'll do together as a class, is how to do Shabbat at home, right? Because you can't always schlep out to the temple. And frankly, it's a beautiful practice to have a Shabbat dinner in your home, invite people, and be able to do this at your small sanctuary, namely your table, which was another important modification in Jewish worship. We had a gigantic altar in the temple in Jerusalem, and that altar needs to be made smaller, and we bring it into our home, and it is the Shabbat table. Okay? So, Kabbalat Shabbat, this is the first section. Here's our warm-up, right? So sorry, I'm getting phone calls, and unfortunately, we've had a death in the congregation, but okay. So the Kabbalat Shabbat experience is really about warming up the soul, getting it ready, right? We don't always do all 6 Psalms in a manual. We usually choose maybe 1, maybe 2. And the Lachadodi, which is pretty traditional to us, is a Kabbalist prayer. And I wanted to talk about the last stanza. So what some of you seem to do or know to do is to turn toward the sanctuary door, right? And to bow. Bowi kala, bowi kala. It's one of the pieces of choreography that we do. And it's a way of bowing, of acknowledging the Shabbat bride coming in, which is very much a Kabbalist tradition. Shabbat bride coming in and us acknowledging her. It allows for us then, we have this amazing way of separating, of putting like a layer of icing in between our cake in the Chatzi Kaddish. Now at our congregation, the Chatzi Kaddish is, we just do that one time. But if you were to go to more traditional spots, that Chatzi Kaddish is going to be used a lot as a way of layering sections so that you know that a section's ending and a new section's beginning. Any questions about that? I can't hear you, Linda. Oh, you've all been muted. How did that happen?
So
Sorry
did you
about
mute
that.
us?
I didn't mute you, but
I did.
go.
Okay, we haven't done the Katsi Kaddish for several months.
Yeah, well, it's, you know, it's one of those, it's a lovely semicolon, but it's not something that we feel in the rubrics of prayer that, how are you getting muted? Cassandra, are you muting people?
I'm muting people because if people aren't muted and they're not talking, I'm getting feedback. So I assume that
Oh, I see.
people are getting it.
Okay, no problem. Okay, so yes, that's true, Linda. Anything else anybody wants to ask about this particular piece? Okay, I'm going to mute you back up again. Let's change the slide. Okay, here is the first of the series that we talked about, and this begins our real worship. This is the Shema and its blessings. The very first, you can switch slides now. Very first in this section is the Baruch Hu. Now, there's choreography attached to this I want to share with you, but what you might not realize is similar to the Torah blessings. This should be a call and response. At Emmanuel, people usually just sing the whole thing with me, and that's not bad or good. It's just the way you want to do it. That's completely fine. But really, this is me calling out to you. Are you ready to praise God? And you responding to me, I'm ready. We're ready. Collectively, we can go forward, okay? So you probably noticed that there's choreography that's usually attached to this. What normatively should happen if you're going to do the call and response model is that I bow first. I'm going to use my hand. Baruch Hu et Adonai. And I'm standing straight up for Adonai. Why? Because Adonai is upright. Adonai is Yashar. Adonai is straight. Adonai deserves our full presence. What you would do in response to me is Baruch Adonai HaMavorach. So you too would bend it Baruch up on Adonai. And the way you wouldn't necessarily give a knee bend because you don't really have time. So Baruch Adonai. Everybody understand that? I know that's different than some of your minhags traditionally on Shabbat, but that is one of the ways to be able to do the choreography correctly there. Bindala.
This is a real difficult part for me because I don't know if I believe in God or not. And all the bending and the bowing really bothers me. I just can't bring myself to do it. It seems hypocritical if I do. You know, I've been on this quest and it isn't getting me closer. It's making me ask more questions, but that's one of the questions. And I remember asking Rabbi Shulman when he was, in the throes of all his self-questioning and everything. And I said to him, how do you do it? How do you pray? And I don't think I'm going to tell you what he said because you wouldn't like it.
Oh, I know exactly what he said, actually, but
know. I know you know, but I don't know if everybody else knows. And it's just a real problem for me.
Look, that's valid. Here's the beautiful part about Judaism. You don't need to believe in God to be a Jew, right? You absolutely don't. We are Yisrael. We are God wrestlers, right? It's different than Islam. Islam is about supplication, right? I believe. I must believe. Judaism is about wrestling. We wrestle deity, God willing, our entire lives. We never give up that wrestle, right? And I think it's an important piece of who we are Jewishly and who we are as a community to allow that sacred wrestling and to not judge it, right? So let me tell you, Bind, I don't ever think of the bowing as bowing to God. That wouldn't sit with me. I see the divine in everybody in that congregation, and God willing, I see the divine in everybody I meet. That's what I aspire to do. Do I always do it? No, it's hard, especially when you're cut off in traffic, for example. But I am aspiring to see the God in you, and I am bowing to you. Wait, Bindle, I can't hear you. Unmute yourself, Bindle.
Say what?
Oh, there you go. Okay, now I can hear you.
I said I like that a lot.
Yeah, it's one of the ways that I make sense of it. And it feels good to do choreography. I like the physical input of it. The moving piece of it is important to me. I can't stand still and pray, right? And look, we have a tradition of not standing still and praying, right? This, what you see a lot of people do. Now, interestingly, I had a teacher tell me, well, why do the people do that? Well, it used to be light was a precious thing. And there was probably only one candle as you poured over a sacred text, with a lot of people sharing that one sacred text. And so men, because unfortunately women were not present to do it, would come into the text and go out, and come in and go out and look, right? Come close and move out of the way. And so that's where all this comes from, which I think is interesting. I don't know if it's true, but I think it's fascinating. I've unmuted all of you. Any questions about that or comments so far? Nope. Great. So now our next piece is the creation, right? The Ma'ariv Aravim. This is sort of a global, right? And is we get nature and God's presence in it is important to us Jewishly. And I think for me, this comes out of biblical text. So we have the creation story, right? God bringing in light, God creating light. But, if that's hard to get your head around, let me tell you something that I find really amazing about imagining God as creator of physical world. There is a story that is so gorgeous. We do it every whole Hamoed. So we do it for Pesach, and also we do it in the holiday of Sukkot, in the midst of the holiday. And it's the biblical story of Moses saying to God, prove to me you exist. Prove to me you're out there. And God saying, you can't see me and live. And Moses saying, I need to know you're there. So God makes a deal with Moses. God takes Moses and puts Moses in the cleft of a rock. And then, as if God had a hand, God places God's hand over Moses and says, I am going to walk, okay, in front of you. But you cannot, because you can't see me and live, I'm going to lift my hand and you can see my back. And when I look out at the world and the night coming in, I think it's the perfect illustration of seeing God's back, right? I don't understand I don't understand astrophysics. I don't understand how the sun rises and sets. Here's what I know. I know that it's miraculous. It's miraculous. And it is an example of me seeing God's back when I don't understand. I don't understand I could never understand all the components of it. And you know what? My daughter who's going to study to be an astrophysicist, there's going to be stuff in her study that's going to be mystery to her. So I look at it as seeing God's back, okay? Revelation, redemption, and creation is really so present for the Jew when they're praying. Next, Ahavat Olam. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's go back. Sorry, on the last slide there. Revelation. No worries. Ahavat Olam. This talks really about God's love for us, right? And it is after we sort of acknowledge that love that we then answer with, I believe, right? Now, I believe statement is whatever you want it to be, because Judaism isn't about emunah or faith in a strict adherence. It's about a belief system you've created in terms of your relationship with the divine. So let's turn the slide. Turn the slide, please. Thank you. Thank you. This Shema statement, God is one, right? Shema Yisrael, hear Israel, Adonai Eloheinu, God is our God. Adonai Echad, God is one. Those are powerful words. But what I want you to notice is never once does it say, Hear, O Israel, I believe, right? Our belief statement is, I believe in the oneness of God, right? Not I believe in God. I believe in oneness. I believe in completeness. I believe in shalom, the peace. All right. Any questions? We're going to go through the V'ahavta, guys, and then we're going to pause. And I'd like to talk to you about how you like the next classes to be. I want to honor your time and make this class only an hour and not go over, because I don't think that's fair. So, V'ahavta, here we go. Here's Torah. Here, in the chanting, this is chanted exactly the way it's chanted in Torah. However, it's 3 different pieces of Torah all put together, okay? So, this is about, it has an interesting construct. It's about a command to love God with all of your heart, with all your soul, with all of your might. It is really, at its face, an impossibility, isn't it? How do you command somebody to love? Not possible necessarily, correct? Can't make you love me. Can't make you love God, right? So really, if you unpack it, which I really would like to do in much more detail with this particular prayer, it says a whole bunch of stuff about how Torah should be engraved in your heart, how it should be taught, how there should be a manifestation of a mezuzah on your doorpost or on your gate. Has many facets to it, and important for us to unpack. All right, I'd like to pause here And if you would, I'm going to unmute you. I would like to know what some of you might be interested in learning about after we finish the unpacking next week of the rest of these slides. Why are you here? What would you like to learn?
Everything.
Well, you say everything. Does it have to do with pronunciation? Does it have to do with what this stuff means? Does it have to do with where it came from in terms of, the first time we find it, where's
It's hard.
the root of it?
It's hard to know because you don't know what you don't know.
That is true. Anybody else?
Actually, there are certain prayers that I hadn't thought about since camp, and it would be nice to know more about them, as in the Venu. Since it's been brought back to the manual, was the first time I think I've really heard it since camp.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Nancy, Linda, anything you want to add to the mix?
Yeah, I would definitely like to work on kind of translation and pronunciation too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you also similarly?
Nice.
Okay. Maybe we can unpack the actual Hebrew
Yeah.
of what you're really saying as opposed to what you might, you think you're saying.
Right, right.
Okay, cool.
Actually,
Anybody else?
Is there a way to maybe compare and contrast the way we say certain prayers as compared to the way they are in other, other reconstructionists or?
Yeah,
I know
we
there are
can
certain prayers, including.
Because we actually do like a mixture of Sephardic and Ashkenazi. Because when we first joined the synagogue, it was Ashkenazi we were using. And then as time went on, we did switch and start doing in Sephardic pronunciation.
Yeah,
But sometimes we
comfortable. No, we don't
That's
go
not what
back.
I'm looking for.
We don't go back. Actually, we don't use Ashkenazi. The only time we used Ashkenazi Hebrew at all was Rabbi Shulman always did the Kaddish in Ashkenazi Hebrew.
Right.
But that was the only time. And by the way, to blow your mind further, the Mornis Kaddish is not Hebrew. It's Aramaic. So I think we're going to stick with Sephardic pronunciation, Linda. It's what I'm certainly
that's
most
what
comfortable.
I want. So because like I said, some of my pronunciations I know are not quite Sephardic. So
God understands you.
God
understands you completely. No worries. Go ahead, Bindala.
When you say Sephardic, do you really mean Israeli? Because I know Rabbi Shulman stuck to the Ashkenazic, but all the other rabbis coming in used to, be more toward the Israeli. I never heard anyone say Sephardic.
Yeah, it is. You're absolutely right that that Israeli Hebrew is pronounced using Sephardic pronunciation, as opposed to the Ashkenazim, who had their own sort of took a letter and made it an S sound as opposed to a T sound.
Right.
So, right? So the Tav became, right?
Yeah.
The mitzvot Sav and not the mitzvot Tav.
But may I also say something else? Reuben, come here.
Yeah.
Come to this.
Yeah.
I have trouble, everybody, but I have particular trouble hearing you because A, I can't see your face. B, now I can see your.
Yeah, much better.
I have to be able to read your lips. We don't have closed captioning.
Sorry.
So the closer to the
Yeah.
and the more clearly you can speak, the better I will understand you. Thank you.
Well, welcome. I was actually asking not pronunciation as much as in other forms of Judaism, there are actually other words that are used in the same prayer that we do, such as the Kiddush, certain prayers again.
Well, you know,
That's what I'm.
I think, you know what, Ruben? I think that's a great idea. And maybe for down the line, once we get a really clear understanding of what we do, how we do what we do, right? You know, only because it adds a lot of insertion, and I don't want people to be like overwhelmed. So that's for, I think, down the line a little bit, but a good idea. If you have any requests, special requests, just send me an email and we'll make it work. Okay. So does this time work for next week for all of you?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, terrific. We'll finish unpacking the prayer and then we'll begin to dive deep into something so that you can sort of do a deep dive and feel comfortable. Okay.
Okay.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks so for being
Thank
here,
you.
guys.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
The next Wednesday.
Can you stick around for like 3 seconds?
I happily will. I'm going to stop the recording.